Good morning. This is the Successful Funding Show. My name is Carl Dakin, and I'm your host this morning. This show is all about funding, meaning that anyone who needs to raise funding, whether you're an entrepreneur, growing business, charitable program, government project, whatever, funding has a lot of common elements, and this show is to share knowledge about raising funding and give you some singular insights into specific projects, which is what we're going to be talking about this morning. So, our topic in general this morning is the use of artificial intelligence with interactive agents. And in specific applications. We're going to get into high detail on that and why that is both a opportunity from a business standpoint and from a funding standpoint as we cover all the range of things that may happen. With me today on the program are my two partners, compatriots in crime or actual profitability, depends on how this works out. I have with me Emiliano De Laurentiis, who is the CEO and founder of Knowledge Avatars, who has the technology platform that we'll be talking about. And then, as a special guest, because I rarely have two guests at the same time, but I have Rafi Andonian. He is the celebrity historian, and that's a very important label as we get into today's topic. So we're going to have fun talking about funding today. And Emiliano, I'm going to let you go first. Please, give the audience a little bit of background on yourself, Knowledge Avatars, and we'll jump to Rafi, and then we'll dive into the newest business opportunity that we're working on together.
Sure. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for having me on your show. And nice seeing you again, Rafi. So, Knowledge Avatar started many years ago as a project to actually, if you really look at my history, it started about 40 years ago with the concept of differentiating learning, making learning accessible to more people, and giving and taking care of the individual differences that everybody comes to a classroom with. And the only way you could do that really in an efficient and cost efficient manner is I mean, the way to do this is to give everybody a tutor. The only way to do it efficiently is by giving people a tutor that is a technology. And so 40 years ago, I was developing educational software published by Prentice Hall, and it went it was distributed all over the world. And it had a chatbot. It had a chatbot because it made the chatbot made the conversation possible, and made it possible for a student to ask questions and to get the information that they needed to excel and to master whatever it is that they were learning, whether it was physics or biology or chemistry. And we had all those topics, all those courses. In fact, it was a few years ago, a teacher from India called me and said, "Hey, Juliana, I've been looking for you for 30 years. I finally found you, and I'm still using your software." And that was and it may still be used today. They work on floppy disks. I only have one computer that can run it, but it's there. And then in the 90s, we went online with Lifelong.com. Lifelong.com was basically the same content, except that rather than being on floppy disk, now we're not putting it all online. And it won many awards. It won awards for the National Information Infrastructure Award that Al Gore was giving out. We won with the top 10 educational software in China with as well, and in other places. The Discovery Channel gave us an award, and the Science Museum in San Francisco. So we had a lot of success with that content. And basically, the idea is, how can you differentiate the learning experience so that everybody gets what they need at that time, either through micro learning or through a conversation that gets them to meet their goals. And There's another thing too. We rarely talk about gamification, and gamification is just in theory is the idea of making educational software enticing by having game capabilities. But gamification is also about reinforcement, reinforcement theory, and how you reinforce people for doing a task. So when you think of a slot machine, for example, in a casino, the slot machine has a reinforcement schedule that reinforces a person in such a way that it encourages them to keep on using the slot machine, and it's there's a theory called flow. You may have heard of the theory. I can't pronounce the author's name, but it's Mikhaila. I think it's Mikhaila Csikszentmihalyi, something like that. I know I messed it up, but you you can find it with that mess up. But but the book Flow talks about what are the elements that make people, that motivate people to learn. And the number one element, there are a couple of main things. One is that the tasks that the person should be doing should be easy enough for them to get to the next level, but not so easy that it's boring. And if you have that feature in something in the course, then people are motivated to keep on going. And that's built into Knowledge Avatars. The Knowledge Avatars is our latest project. It's an educational tutoring system, and it has a pedagogy built into the system. So you can train a bot to be a tutor with Knowledge Avatars, and whether you, even if you're not the great teacher, or if you're not a teacher at all, the system will teach effectively, and you can really get the information out and share your knowledge with people, and have them learn. And it has a lot of other applications, as we're going to see today. We have an application that is not exactly training, and it's not exactly teaching physics or chemistry, but it is educational, and has a lot of use. So I don't know.
Yeah. So maybe talking about the fact that I guess less than 2 months ago, it was determined that there may be a specific niche application for these avatars, where we could present a person from history as though they were here today. So in a perfect world, and you'll see how close we're going to get here in a few minutes, we're going to add a fourth guest to today's program who is a character out of history. And this person we can talk to just like any other conversation, but they are going to draw upon their basically life experience, their perspectives from who they are when they were sometime in our past. And this adds another element to everything we do. And since we're talking about going back in history now, I'm going to jump over to Rafi. And Rafi, please introduce yourself and explain why you're here today.
I'm Rafi, and I am known as the celebrity historian on television. I've been on hundreds of times across ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS, major network news stations across the country, presenting historical topics in a fun, newsworthy, relevant way that keeps things engaging, and using a lot of visuals and props to interact with historical content. And so as it pertains to this project, that's the key here, is the ability to interact with the history. I strive to do that in my presentations, whether I'm broadcasting on television, or I'm leading a tour, or engaging with the actual places, or if I'm doing a speech, I take props for the audience to have a tactile experience interacting with the stuff to help remember it. And that principle applies here in what we're doing with the technology that Emiliano described. We're allowing, my role is always trying to make history more accessible. And this is a tool that allows making history more accessible in a couple of different ways. One is its scalability on the user side. You can have multiple users, many users, countless users, you access the material simultaneously. It's not finite. And two, it can export. It can be delivering a historic character. Obviously, having been at historic sites and worked at historic sites, I worked at the Gettysburg Battlefield, the Martin Luther King home, and Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was created. All major sites. You may on occasion have historic characters that people get to interact with, but they're limited to the human that is there, physically present at that particular time, and the audience that is in front of that person in that particular place. In this particular instance, we can take that character and deliver it, for example, to China, or really where Emiliano's won an education award, or deliver it, to multiple classrooms, hundreds of classrooms across the country. And that certainly makes it accessible, which is something that I've been striving to do, which is why I present history on major morning news stations, not in the History Channel. I don't try to go within the pocket of preaching to the choir, but being able to deliver to where people are beyond the audiences that are already interested. And the way that you do that is to find a way to engage them through interaction. And that's what this does. And the other way that this makes it accessible is the fact that it's actually interactive. So it's not just the scalability and ability to export, but for example, in history is a field that takes many years to study. An average history PhD takes 10 years of postgraduate work. The reason it takes so long is because there's massive amounts of archival research that is necessary for you to begin to get a grasp of the particular areas that you're studying. Well, what this allows us to do is take mass amounts of information, train it into the AI avatar, and now, in a simple way, without having to sift through thousands of pages of archival material, you as a user can access thousands of pages of archival material simply by having a conversation with, say, George Washington, who's already been trained based on George Washington's writings, thousands of pages of writings, and answers to you drawing upon those writings of George Washington. So it makes it accessible by being able to have a real conversation without having to go access archives for years. And so that's my role in this is, my interest and practice in making education more accessible in this instance, particularly in the history field.
Yeah, so great background. And before we introduce our fourth guest, which you may have already tripped over, is going to be George Washington. We're going to bring him on stage briefly because he was up last night preparing for today's program. So we'll ask him a few questions. But before we do that, I want to make a couple key observations for people. Everybody out there has heard of chatbots and AI agents and so forth, and we're in the current breakout of AI and it being applied to everything. And we are one of those breakthroughs on using AI to the fullest extent to gain greater value from the use of AI. But Knowledge Avatars platform allows this to be used in what more accurately is called a generative response, meaning that we don't have paired question and answers that have to be programmed in advance. And if you ask the chatbot a question, it's limited to that question and that answer because that's all it's been trained to do. In this case, the information is brought into the avatar. It's comes a body of knowledge that the avatar can draw upon, and each individual can ask any question they want, and then the avatar will look through its store of information and give a response to that particular individual that matches that particular question. This makes it superior in many cases to a lot of things out there that are called AI agents or chatbots. It puts it at the highest use and application of AI within this format. And you can see as I introduce George, and we're going to ask him a few questions. And if anyone's in the audience today would like to ask a question of George, this is going to be your opportunity to do so. And you can see that this is not a highly scripted. We're going to try to keep everybody, inside the ropes here. We're going to, you basically can go anywhere you want to go. So with that, let's get George online here and see what we can do to get him where we want to go. And here is George. And
we have to switch over too. Let
yeah,
me send you a link. Yes. Did we lose him? Ah, here he is.
This is what I love about doing technology demos. They always.
I just texted you a link.
Yeah, I'm going to take that link and let's try it. Play. There we go. This worked better than I guessed for a fallback, but this is George number 2. We were going to show you George number 1, who is a high-res character. It looked exactly like George and talked like George. And
still in prototype
same person, but he's in a different costume, for lack of a better description. He's going to answer questions the same way as high-res George, but nonetheless, here we go. So I'm going to start him off with a good morning.
You're not sharing your screen, Carl?
It's not shared.
Or if you are, we don't see it.
Yeah. Can you see him now?
I cannot.
Yes.
No.
Okay. Well, here we go again. I'm going to ask him to say good morning, and hopefully everybody can hear this.
Nope.
Did you hear that, Emiliano and Rafi?
I cannot hear anything.
No.
Couldn't hear anything. Okay, we're back into. I'm going to have to bring him up in a different fashion, so I'm going to cancel him out here. And I'm going to cancel him out of here. And okay. I'm going to try this a different way. I'm going to bring them in the back door, as they say. And now. Can you see him now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and let's see if we can ask him a question. And going to ask him good morning for the 3rd time, so it'll be interesting to see.
Good morrow to you again. I trust the hours before you shall be marked by peace and steady purpose. Repetition of courtesy never offends a gentleman, and I receive it kindly.
Good.
Okay, tell us about why you chose not to run for a third term.
I resolved to retire from the presidency because I believed the example of rotation in office to be essential to the preservation of our Republican government. To continue beyond a second term might have invited the spirit of monarchy, against which we had so lately contended. I was also much inclined to return to private life, my strength being worn by long years of public service. By withdrawing voluntarily, I hope to teach my countrymen that power is a trust, not a possession.
I'm curious, why have two terms at all? Why not just have one term?
I asked that question.
And then, of course, the other question would be, why is the term 4 years? But I mean, like, how did they make that decision? How did that decision come about? Rafi probably knows the answer to that.
I did not conceive two terms as a rule at the outset, yet I judged that a single term might be insufficient to bring the new government into steady operation.
Okay.
The first years were much taken up with establishing precedent, calming divisions, and setting the machinery of the Constitution in motion. A second term afforded continuity, so that the nation might gain firmness before another hand took the helm. Thus, two terms seemed a prudent balance betwixt stability and the avoidance of excessive attachment to power.
Well, it's an interesting concept because the idea would be that you have one term to get your act together. And if you don't get your act together, then the people can kick you out, right? And then the second term is where the actual work happens.
Yeah, so Rafi, from a standpoint of teaching people about history and having access to George in person, 24/7, anywhere in the world, how do you see that George might be best used to share his knowledge and his perspective as a person of history?
Think about how quickly you got to the heart of the question here, because
Yeah.
it would take a lot of reading to get these answers, and you'd have to sift through a lot of material to be able to answer the way he just did in just a few sentences. So the way I see this is there's a lot of efficiency. As you point out, there's 24/7 access. It can be in dozens, hundreds of classrooms at the same time, unlike a human. And I've been part of the museum world, and we often did outreach programs to classrooms, but it's limited by your staff. This is not. It can be an extension of the staff because the staff can train it in the material that they want, such as this material, and have clone themselves and be multiple places at once with the quality of information of a museum or educational institution. And so, classrooms, curriculums are very tight. You don't have time to go through, a book on every historical moment. And so instead of having to go through a giant compilation of primary sources or, read an entire biography on George Washington, which you're not going to be able to do within an academic year, you're able to access the massive information by asking specifically the questions that are relevant in your classroom, whether it's a civics class or a history class. And so you can interact with the material with the guiding questions, the critical questions that are important to the particular curriculum and syllabus of that class and that school year and the grade level. So look at how quickly we got that information without having to dig through hundreds of pages.
Yeah. Let me add a couple of things to that. One is that you can, if a school wants to use something like this, George, first of all, it has thousands of documents already that has been trained on, so it knows so much about George Washington, right? But it uses a lot of the AI logic to be able to sift through all that to make sense of it. but furthermore, a teacher or a school can put in their own curriculum and have a learning path that is specific to what they're trying to emphasize. So if they wanted to emphasize, the structure of the Constitution or the other elements of those years, they can emphasize those in that learning path, and so it's not just chatting with the general information. So a school can have a very specific type of content that is particular to what their interests are. Yeah, and I think Socrates didn't like books because he felt that you could not interact with a book. You couldn't debate the author. Here we can actually debate George and ask it why. Ask it why. It's not just the information. It's asking why, and
Yeah.
it's a whole new way of learning. I think that students are not used to right now. But they should get used to it because it's a critical thinking thing. Like what do we ask George? What should we ask George? What are we curious about? If we
Yeah,
had
so
George,
I had two pieces to that, which is that not only can you debate George, but you can have the founders debate each other. So you heard George Washington here in the answers that he just gave refer to calming divisions, and there was certainly, contrary to popular belief, there are divisions among the founding generation on exactly how to move forward and which political principles to apply. And there were debates about the Constitution, and as the Constitution circulated the states and sought ratification. And so, when you're coming fresh, I mean, you think today political primaries are hot. Imagine debating the very Constitution, the blueprint of the government across every single state in conventions. And some of these states were very tight, and a couple of states rejected the Constitution. So I think that when you consider that divisiveness that he had to deal with, that suggests that there was a lot of political dialogue and debate going on. So you can get multiple characters, a George Washington and say a James Madison, who was the primary author of the Constitution, maybe a Patrick Henry who opposed to the Constitution, and put them all together and have a discussion about, hey, why did you guys disagree on these particular matters, And so I think that is a very powerful tool that you cannot do in a book unless you spend a lot of time studying it, which a specialist can do. But in a classroom that has to cover hundreds of years of American history in several months, you're not going to have the ability to dive into that niche. But you can quickly, in one class period, get the essence of that with this interaction. And one other piece to that is, you were talking about Socrates in the book and how books can be ineffective today. Think about why social media is popular, because it allows user interaction with the company, the brand, the influencer, whatever the case is, the producer. And this is what this is doing. This is allowing user interaction with the content creator, with the content itself. And so you're tapping into what makes social media popular with kids and competes with books. Reading is down, as we know. And where does that time go? Social media, among other things. Well, now we're giving it in a different format so that instead of, scrolling through garbage, you're able to interact in a social user input way with actual quality educational content.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, so this has been one of the fun things that we have experienced as we look at George in a Knowledge Avatars format, trained with information about him, that we have a variety of business opportunities where George may provide value. We kind of broken it down into 4 categories. One is education, which is what we've talked about, George being available to a student in a classroom, outside the classroom, or to anyone who simply has an interest in history to learn more about history directly from the horse's mouth, or George's mouth in this case. And a second one is for entertainment purposes, meaning that talking with George, although you're learning and experiencing from what he shares with you, you may find that this is better than watching your football team lose another game this last weekend, or some other form of entertainment. And it's been interesting as we've been testing George to see how well he performs, how accurate he is. You can get carried away asking questions. It's kind of like, wow, this is fun to do, to just find out how he thinks about things. Whether and each of us has tested George to see if he'll stay in his time zone, so to speak, in his character. And I've asked hardball questions that might sound and look like questions we would ask of the current or last president of the United States about international affairs and public policy. We've had other tests by Emiliano and Rafi about, do you know Abraham Lincoln, a character who existed in history after George Washington? And it's been a lot of fun to do that. A third thing that we've kind of toyed around with is where each of these historic personas could be a mentor or advisor. So you might create a board of advisors comprised of a group of historical characters. So when you get up in the morning as a business person and you've got a hard decision ahead of you, you might go to your board of advisors and go, hey, George or Ben Franklin or Caesar, what would you do in this particular situation, and get their input and feedback. And so it has those, but then the fourth place where we see value from a business standpoint is for a sponsor who wants to put their name in association with this type of engagement or interaction between people who are asking George or the historic persona. And we can put a banner ad at the bottom saying sponsored by this foundation or this company or this individual whose name is present every time somebody interacts with the persona. And this gives them the eyeballs of views, which would support an advertising rate or sponsorship fee along the way. And so we're in the process, as we've been joking, that we're figuring this out on the fly, real time, of what is this, what benefits does it convey, who receives those benefits, what price would they be willing to pay, and how does this make one or dozens of potential business opportunities of different levels, different paybacks, different ROI. And it's been an interesting challenge. This would be kind of a perfect grad school program to teach, is how do you commercialize something that never existed before, that has now been brought forward by the work of knowledge avatars and technical advances to do something that is above and superior to all the other things that are out there for this purpose. So Emiliano, Rafi, other ideas on how George might be put to work to squeeze a little more value out of his experience and knowledge?
Well, I would say at historic sites. So we've talked about the classroom, but certainly there are historic sites where you go to learn about the people who lived there. An obvious one would be George Washington's home, and you can actually, this is the closest you're ever going to come to meet George Washington when you go to Mount Vernon. But other places, of course, throughout the East Coast that he spent time in, from Valley Forge to, Colonial Williamsburg to in Virginia, to Philadelphia, could all be helpful places that you might imagine meeting George, whether it's, during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia or the famous winter with his soldiers quartering at Valley Forge in Pennsylvania, or when he was in the Virginia government at Williamsburg, Virginia, which was the capital at the time of the state of Virginia, where he's from. You can see all these places that you get to actually, when you're at a historic site, you're imagining the characters at the place, at the physical environment that you're at. But now, you take a step toward being able to meet one of those characters or more. You can have multiple people, as we talked about earlier, interact that were around him at the time, wherever the context is. and actually be able to engage with them on site, which I think is pretty remarkable and certainly makes for a more memorable experience. If you've ever visited a historic site and museum, probably the moments you remember the most are the moments that you got to engage and interact with content, whether it was hearing firsthand accounts that were interviews, whether it's being able to interact with some sort of user input, material that then kind of responds based on what you're putting in. So this is taking that to a whole other level. So it's the closest you're ever going to come to meeting him. Instead of just seeing him at his grave at Mount Vernon, you actually get to talk to him.
Yeah, and I could see it. It would be fun to have George be a docent, for example, in an historical museum, and giving people a tour of the museum from his perspective, and from the perspective of somebody in the 18th century. So I think that could be another application. But definitely, I think that having a George in a classroom or museum makes it really interesting for to have a debate with it, and just a teacher can really hype it up and ask all kinds of interesting questions. That so we should ask George a few more questions. We have time today.
I think that's a good idea. And as we do that, give consideration to the possibility of somebody instead of George. So if we're talking about Abraham Lincoln, or we want to show a debate between Lincoln and Douglas, we can do that.
I wonder what George thinks about some of the other people who framed the Constitution. What was his opinion of those people?
Mount Vernon is my beloved estate upon the Potomac, where I have ever found more true contentment than in the tumults of public life.
Ask him what he ate.
It came to me through my family and was much enlarged and improved by my own labors, until it became both a working plantation and a comfortable seat. There I applied myself to agriculture, experiment, and the orderly management of my lands and people. It was my earnest wish, after serving my country, to end my days there in quiet reflection.
Yeah, when I was talking to him, it was quite interesting that he was saying that even though he had a lot of farmland, a lot of land, that he was also often cash poor. He didn't use the word poor, but they was strapped for cash. So it's interesting that I didn't realize that part of his history, and he seemed to generally work the land himself. He was there working. He wasn't just a gentleman farmer and had everybody else work. Is that your understanding as well?
Ruffy, what was the question you wanted to ask him?
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to ask him what he had for dinner. Like, what does he normally eat? What was he normally eat for dinner? What was a common favorite dish for dinner? I'm curious. Yeah.
My table was commonly plain rather than sumptuous, for I preferred simplicity to excess. I often dined upon roasted or boiled beef or mutton, with vegetables from my own gardens, and Indian hoe cakes or bread. Saltfish was a frequent dish, especially at midday, and I was never fond of heavy sauces. For drink, I took small beer with my meals, and at times a glass of Madeira in moderation.
He brewed his own beer, I think, and hoe cakes. I never heard of that until I spoke to George. Do you know what a hoe cake is?
Yeah. What is a hoe cake?
I didn't know. Carl doesn't know. Carl, ask him. What's a hoe cake?
I'm not even sure how to spell that.
Hoe. It's right there. It should be on the screen. Hoe cake. If you misspell it, it will forgive you.
It'll figure it out.
Yeah.
A hoe cake is a simple bread much used in my day, made chiefly of Indian cornmeal mixed with water and a little salt.
Cornbread.
It was baked upon a flat iron or directly upon the hearth, sometimes upon a hoe, from which it took its name.
That's the interesting part. I think I want to
Well,
make some
Such
cooking.
bread was coarse yet nourishing, and well suited to both field laborers and household tables.
and the reason I bring
I
this up,
found it wholesome fare, especially
talking.
when fresh from the fire.
Yes,
the
go ahead.
reason I bring this up is because we talked about meeting these characters, and these are human beings, and they do more than just public service, politics, etc. And many people are drawn towards knowing the actual person. And so, if you visit a historic site, you visit Mount Vernon, and Emiliano, you were saying if George could give you a tour through the site. Well, if you're coming to his home, you're going to see his dining room, and having a sense of what they had. It's literally like coming over to his place for dinner, and having a sense of maybe then what the dinner table conversation was like, which is something that you could do. And I'll go to another historic character to give you an example. Martin Luther King. I worked at his childhood home, and his father was known. His father was a preacher and his mother teacher, and so they valued religion and education in his household. And one of the things that was required for him as a child was to, before he came to dinner, to have read the newspaper for the day. And so the dinner table conversation very much influenced who he became. And so you can see how dinner table, having understanding what's going on at the dinner table, whether it's social conversation to get a sense of 18th century social life, or or how it helped formulate who they were in the long run, could be valuable, and also more intimate when you visit that person's home, because you're meeting them over breaking bread, so to speak, right? And you can put other characters in there that would have been at the dinner table to be able to see a dynamic conversation, which is what this enables, that you cannot do through text in regular
And
museum.
actually, we could ask George. I don't know if we'll do it now, but we could ask George to have dinner with him, and actually have a conversation with George,
Yeah.
as if you had the dinner table. Yeah, so that's pretty fascinating too.
Yeah.
Having recently experienced Thanksgiving dinners, adding George to the guest list might be a bump up in conversation. Certainly, if it avoids any discussion of current politics, that could make it all the better.
And that brings up a point as well, that George is actually in character. Like so even though he's accessing a lot of information, he has access to a lot of trillions of pieces of information, but he actually stays in character. And so if you ask him, for example, ask him when his wife died, and he should tell us that. We'll see what he says.
My dear wife, Martha, departed this life on the 22nd day of May in the year 1802. She survived me by somewhat more than 2 years and bore her final illness with great fortitude. Her loss was deeply felt by all who knew her, for she possessed a kind heart and steady spirit. I had ever trusted that she would be remembered with affection and respect.
I think it depends how you ask a question too. What I was looking for was whether or not he would know that his wife passed away after him, and I think it's just the way we asked the question. But if you put him in character, so to speak, and have a conversation about what did your wife do in this year, he would normally say, I had already passed away, so I wouldn't know.
This is one of the aspects that we are learning on the fly here about questions, framing them, how you get the most accurate answer. You get something that's from his personal knowledge as opposed to something that might be available in a book on his life, or from an education program or something of that nature.
For example, if you asked him, did you ever have drinks, or did you ever have supper with Abe Lincoln? Then that he would obviously Abe Lincoln lived much later than he did. So
See what he says about Abe.
I cannot speak from knowledge of such a man, for Abraham Lincoln was born after my own course in this world was finished.
Yeah, there you go. That's the appropriate
Of his
response.
deeds or character I have no personal acquaintance, nor any certain report within my own experience. It would therefore be improper for me to render judgment upon him. On this matter, I must confess myself unsure.
Right. And that's important because one of the problems, and Rafi, you can speak to this, but in telling history, sharing history, there's a tendency, which I picked up from your courses, that we always try to interpret history from today rather than the time, the era when the actual historical event occurred. And it creates a bias in that presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we tend to approach things with our current framework, how we see the world today, how we see our, political dynamics, religious beliefs, social dynamics, interactions between social classes, genders, etc., how we see many different things. And so, also understanding certain, things we might take for granted in how the economy works. They're living in a different world, a different visualization of the globe, a different economic structure. And so I think understanding that and understanding their context, which is the term I would use for that, is very important. And so one of the things that's valuable here is you can ask your questions from your own modern perspective, but George is answering from his world and his context, which forces you to kind of step outside your immediate assumed interpretation.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is where we bring ourselves today. Emiliano's got to jump to another thing, but
That has actually changed, so I can stay a bit longer.
great. Good to keep you with us then. So now we're looking at, as we shift from what we call technology push, we've got something really cool and we want to do something with it. How do we monetize that? How do we frame it in the form of an investment? What kind of funding might be appropriate to bring this to market for different applications? And as we've worked with this, I even asked George these questions, so I'm backed up by his opinion. How would you monetize this? And it was suggested that we have two approaches when we charge for access, which would be like a subscription or pay-per-view type of thing, where for a fee, a person can have a one or a time zone of different questions they can ask to have him available. That might be on a singular use or over a period of time. The other is a sponsorship where somebody wants to put their name in association with people accessing and asking George questions, talking with him. And so now we're looking at, well, what is the value of that? And we fall back on some standard metrics of how popular is the person, the persona. George ranks up there in the uppermost tier in the world today because tens of millions of people recognize and know who he was and that he was important in history. So by definition, he would command the highest price. When we look at training George, we have already looked at different books that have been published by authors on George's life, on who he is, different aspects of his life. And if we bring those two together, where we're marrying the persona with a book, then that may give us a heightened or elevated hybrid type of a product situation. Rafi has the ability to get us into a number of different groups who hold historical documents that are not available to the public. And we can go the more scholarly route rather than the more entertainment route and ask all these documents to be brought in so that we can make George the utmost source of information about George anywhere in the world, with greater clarity, accuracy, and depth of richness in the character, so that he's the ultimate source of information for George, about George. So we're looking at these different things. We're talking with educational institutions about bringing them into the classroom. We're talking with authors of different historic personas about how we can work with them to elevate their prior work or to help support a new thing coming out. George was selected kind of as our test because we're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in a few months as we roll into 2026. And you're going to see all kinds of things from the recently released Ken Burns miniseries on the Revolutionary War. I know at least a half a dozen new movies that are come out about the Revolutionary War and key characters or figures in the war. And it's going to be a big issue this next year as we think back to the beginnings of this country, the United States, and why they came together, why they shed their relationship with the British Empire. All these things will come into play, and history is going to have a kind of a bump next year from that standpoint. But any time in history is an option. We can go back to the Roman Empire. We can go back to people of faith, of different religions. We can step forward in time after the Revolutionary War to the War of 1812, or the Civil War, or even the Vietnam War. And the complexity of working with people who are recent historical characters, meaning they died within the last 100 years, creates some additional complexity because we often have to deal with character licenses where an estate or somebody holds a right to use of the character in a commercial setting, coupled with any copyrighted or licensed materials as opposed to non-copyrighted materials. So it's an adventure for us as we're moving forward, and we're trying to learn about this. But we would welcome anyone who thinks that an historical persona would benefit them in a classroom, in a museum, in any kind of educational presentation. Interested in sponsoring one or more historic personas on any time in history, give us a call, let us know. And I'm going to release George here from this and come back to our screen. And I'm going to throw up my link here. So you can reach me at kdakin@dakincapital.com. You can get a hold of Emiliano at Knowledge Avatars. And because the celebrity historian is known everywhere in the world, you can look up Rafi and track him down. But this is an open invite where it's one of the fun parts of working with new innovation, new products and services, is this creates all kinds of new opportunities. We haven't thought of them all. And at the same time, we would like to work with anyone who would like to take advantage of this opportunity to make a persona from history part of their world, part of their education, part of their business. And feel free to reach out to us and talk to us about that. So with that, last words from Emiliano, anything you would like to add to our conversation today?
Well, I guess two things. One is that creating a bot is very easy, and we can with our platform, you can create one within a few minutes. So anybody that is interested can talk to me about that. The other thing is that we can now train the bots and curate the content, so there's only the content that you want it to be trained on, so that it doesn't hallucinate, it doesn't make stuff up. And the idea of George Washington came out from the idea of living memoirs, and people are now creating their own memoirs with a bot. Because imagine this, people remember other people who have passed away with pictures and videos. Now you can remember them by having conversation with them about what their life was about, and that's a lot easier to train a bot than it is to write a memoir as in the book. So that's my final
Yeah,
thought.
no, there are so many different applications for knowledge avatars. We met with a professor yesterday who has his own textbook for a course. And in that case, we're not talking about a historic character. We're talking about a live topic today, and making that textbook more than it currently is, and so on. And as Emiliano pointed out, we have a lot of people who want to create a legacy of a person or a companion who can talk to them about their life from their life. So there's dozens of applications here, which are their own business opportunities. Rafi, last words for today.
Yeah, I would say that I've been in a lot of rooms and spaces, whether it's educational, whether it's visiting places and societies and anything, and even just civic circles where people lament the lack of education or the lack of interest or the lack of engagement with certain content, such as historical content and other content as well. And so this is helping solve that by taking the incredible amount of information that's available in the information age and making it accessible in an interactive and engaging way to help increase access and, very importantly, interest in the subjects that we often lament that more people are not engaging with.
Yeah, I've always found that if I'm asking the questions, I tend to listen better than somebody just throwing information at
That's
me.
right.
Right.
Well, hence
That's
back
true.
to the value of user interactive content and why social media has taken off in recent years, right? And so that concept of user input and interaction with the brand is something that has been well established in the past 15 years or so.
So thank you both for being on the show this morning to have this discussion. And thank you to George for dropping in and contributing to our knowledge about himself and the Revolutionary War and the time of the Declaration of Independence. We're all going to hear a lot more about that over the next 12 months as we celebrate the Declaration. And I invite everyone to learn more, and hopefully we will contribute a significant part to that learning process. So thank you all today on behalf of the Successful Funding Show, and we'll see you next week on Tuesday, same time, 8 o'clock a.m. Mountain, 10 o'clock Eastern, and we'll have another fun topic on funding to talk about. Take care.
Thank you.